Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Monday, February 12th. Call to order at 6:53 p.m. Review of meeting minutes, January 11th and January 22nd.
I had got those from Brian on, I think, Sunday. Had no concerns with them. So make a motion to approve the minutes from January 11th and January 22nd as written.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Approval and issuance of the warrant for presidential preference primaries. We need to approve this for the town clerk so we can get it
Yep.
out and
Make a
ready
motion
for...
to approve the warrant for presidential preference primaries as written.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We'll get that for your signature.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Review and approval of the FY24 fire equipment safety grant.
Is Chief Walker present?
Just out in the other room.
He is out in the other room. Do you have a question for him?
I do have a question about the grant.
Okay.
Thank you, Thomas.
It's all right.
Hey,
Thanks, Chief.
that's okay.
Question for you on the fire grant.
On the what?
Fire equipment safety grant?
Okay.
So, Chief, the question I had is on the award amount, which I am very pleased to read, for the equipment to respond to these events, how many sets of equipment will this provide?
So I had initially applied for 6 sets at, I think the quote I was working off of was 900. So it was just a little under $6 grand for that. So doing a quick math, it looks like we'll be able to afford 7 or 8.
Okay. And that's for both vests and helmets?
Correct, with carriers.
Excellent, thank you. I was concerned it would be less at that price tag, but apparently you got a good deal.
But so we're working off a year-old quote. So I mean, six is ideal to start off with.
Okay. Just, my concern was that you would be adequately equipped for events such as these.
We do have some extra funds in the regular operating line. This would just offset that.
Okay.
Excellent.
I have no other questions or concerns.
So if the board is interested, we're looking for a vote to accept and authorization for somebody to be the signatory on the grant.
Make a motion that we accept the FY24 fire equipment safety grant in the amount of $6,745.35 and to authorize Chief Wonka to sign any and all documents needed.
I will second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
You have that paperwork.
Yep.
We'll get it signed tonight and get it back to you.
Okay.
Did you give him the one from the EMPG?
We need to circle back on that one as well.
We have a letter of interest for the Cable Advisory Committee from Phil Johnson.
I'll say it every time. It's always nice to see new letters come in with new people interested.
Absolutely.
Is Mr. Johnson present or not tonight?
I
He's
don't
not with us this
believe
evening.
so. But had experience doing it last time, which helps too.
Yep.
Well, I will.
I'll make a motion to appoint Philip Johnson as a member of the Cable Advisory Committee effective February 12th, 2024, with a term ending June 30th, 2026.
And I will second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And with that,
2 minutes to spare.
we are good until 7 o'clock, our joint business, so we will
Wait.
wait. I'm not going to bother recessing at that point. We'll wait a couple minutes and
In your
begin our joint meeting at 7.
in your email should be the packet from the tech school.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. You might have to wrangle your fellow members. Ah, maybe.
Singular should make it easier.
Thank you, Otis, for jumping up there. Appreciate the help and collaboration as always.
Could the chair stick around with me afterwards for a few minutes to talk about snow tomorrow?
Yep. I have a plan.
Excellent.
No plan.
We
Yes,
got
I
a list
can.
of people asking.
Yeah, given the latest, probably nothing,
Okay.
but we'll see.
Okay.
I think we're talking 2 inches now, so dusting to 2 inches, that's not.
I told folks at this point maybe a bit of a delay, but
Yeah,
we'll see.
I mean, maybe, but I doubt it at this point, even that, we'll see, but
Okay.
a quarter inch an hour is not gonna move the needle.
Do you know that I'm related to the man who lived in my house in 1870? Reverend Hawks?
When did you find out?
A month ago.
Wow.
I did the genealogy on him.
That's fascinating.
On both my mother and my father's side.
So the universe said. Yeah, me. Thank you. Well, there we go. I zapped you.
I agree.
I think that was like a strategy.
I know I'm not, but we'll try it.
Unbelievable.
Hey, Brian, did he get all set up or you just plugged it in?
Leave his papers and walk out.
Was it
Plugged in,
working?
turned it on. It was on.
Okay.
But it's
all
only
right.
showing to the group because.
yeah, we have
Otis-
it.
Okay.
Yep. I just figured I'd have him come up and get going if it was needed setup, but if he's good.
No, it should. I think once he moves his mouse, it should come back on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So weird. Huh?
But unfortunately, it's plural now.
It's okay. It's good company.
All right. Are we all ready to go? Chair says.
Chair says we're ready.
Gonna pay for sitting there. Ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Call the joint meeting with the Finance Committee and the Capital Planning Committee to order at 7:02. Review of the FY25 budget request, education. First up is the Franklin County Technical School. Mr. Martin, come on up. And we all should have gotten it in email today. I think we got the draft. Sure.
Okay.
Thank you and good evening. Rick Martin, I'm the school superintendent, Franklin County Technical School. I'm here to review the educational budget for the town of Erving. There'll be a lot of information, but I'll try to keep it brief because you'll have this information once our school committee votes on it. We have our first reading coming on Wednesday night, and then the school committee then has 1 month to deliberate, and then we do our final vote in March before it goes out to the town. So that just gives you a time frame. Our budget book is a tool to help everyone kind of learn a little bit more about us and find out how we receive our money and how we spend our money. So in the first part of it, you'll see it has a draft on it for first reading. The assessment to the town. So if you see our trend going back to FY21, it's an annual 3% increase. So that number is right over here in the far right at 6.996 million. If you needed more information from the community, you're not quite understanding the trends or what the assessment to the towns mean, you would just click on anything highlighted in blue, and it will take you directly to a paragraph that outlines that. If you needed to go deeper, each of these come with a link to the actual state in the Department of Education, and that will allow you to find more guidance as it pertains to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts relating to town assessments. So if you can't sleep at night, that this is one of those tools that kind of help you get through. Then I go back to the sources of funding, just click in the file left-hand corner, will take you right back to where we were. Now let's start talking about the assessment to towns per pupil and how it impacts Erving. All right, so the next line you would be able to press is right underneath it, and it will take you directly to the Erving. I already highlighted that in yellow. And you're at $18,434 per pupil. To put that in context, the state outlines a various percentage on each of the towns. So in the state's eyes, you are as rich as Dover, Wellesley, Sherburne, Wayland, and Newton, and Needham, and all the other rich towns in the Commonwealth. So congratulations on that. But we all know the real truth. You know, the state is not representing the rural communities at a level that they are representing everybody else, and that hurts everybody. So our overall average is $12,200 per pupil when you average all the towns together. And then when we look at enrollment trends for Erving, and I'll just shrink this down just a little bit so you can see it, you're pretty much in line with what you've been over the last 10 years or so. We don't have next year's numbers yet because we're still in the early part of the application process, in which we have an open house on Thursday night. All are more than welcome to come. And we'll be having a clearer number. Hopefully by the time we vote upon it in March, I may be able to send you a projection on what it might look like for next year. We come pretty close. I projected last year you would have 28. Sorry, I was off by 1, but it was in your favor. We're down to 27, which then allows our town assessment for the per pupil expenditures to be down by $15,000. So that's, you'll see, right now we have our enrollment trends. As you'll see here, it's kind of outlined what the assessments are. You'll see here it is right here. I just highlighted it for this year's lower than the previous year, and that's all due to the number of students. And when I go back to the uses of funding here, so that was the assessment to town trends. We already went through that one, and I'm going to blow this up a little bit. Chapter 70, no, the debt service would be next, and that's our old windows and doors project. It's windows, doors, paving, and roof project we had about 8 years ago. We're about it's 8 out of 15-year bonding, and if we go to the appendices, as far as where Erving is, we're right here at $13,852, right in the far right-hand corner. I should have highlighted that one in yellow. I must have missed that one. But we're an 8-year of a 15-year bond. Chapter 78, you can look at this interesting trend here. We're here at $5,974 million. previous year, 5,955 million, so we only went up 17,000, even though we had an increase in enrollment by 11 students. And they actually put us back in the hold harmless after we were out of hold harmless for 5 years. Why is that? Well, the state reconfigured the formula. They added a deflation rate to it. And basically, across the school district, we found 50 like schools that increased in enrollment, but yet got put back in the hold harmless. So they took the hold harmless formula, they embedded it into the educational budget, and they called it an increase in education. It actually is a decrease across the entire state. So just a heads up, I think everyone's gonna be saying that. As you see, our Chapter 70 aid going up about 500,000, and then another 700,000, and then it goes up another 500,000, and then it goes up 17,000. So with that, our projections were conservative to begin with, so we didn't take that big of a hit, but still a hit nonetheless. And that hit, as you can look at the DOR cherry sheet, if you click on this is a good tool for anyone that wants to learn more about your own towns or your own member towns. You go to the DOR cherry sheet, those numbers I just gave you are right here. Our transportation numbers also went down by 65,000. And when you look about how they calculate it, well, where every town is, you just click on this external source right here, and it will take you right to the DOR master sheet. And all you gotta do for any town you wanna find, Pioneer, Frontier, doesn't make a difference. You just scroll down to Franklin County Tech, you press submit. So the cherry sheet you see in our budget, the 5974, is exactly where we are in our presentation to you tonight. And there's our decline from the previous year, 855 for regional transportation, now 917 the previous year. So making that up resulted in some reduction in staff, because that's too big to make up, and as it pertains to both Chapter 70 hit and the regional transportation hit. So if I go back to the sources of funding, the regional aid transportation, you can see that trend. We took a little bit of a hit there. I don't have to go to the DOR cherry sheet, we just did that. Non-member towns, we had to go up to make up a little bit of the difference, and we were fortunate enough we could do that because we had more out-of-district students. Those out-of-district student tuitions were then applied to offset the operating budget. If you needed to know more about those, that's in the non-member town section. And then what the guidelines are from the Department of Education's down here, that will link you right to that website. I don't have to show you that now. Again, if you can't sleep, it becomes a great medication. Tuition from PEP, we didn't have any more students, so no addition to the sources. And other revenues is Medicaid and surplus equipment and those kind of things. And the excess and deficiencies, we were certified at 581, so a little lower this year, for a total of 15.372 million. Now, how do we spend that money? That's the bottom half of this. So if you just go to the face sheet, you'll have our whole budget. It'll take you through the other 50 pages in charts if you just scroll through. We were a little higher in administration due to contractual arrangements, and we added a portion of our evening school. We now have an evening school that we didn't have in the past. Instructional services, we went down a little bit. In there, we had some retirements, and it explains it here a tiny bit, but with the instructional services, we had some decreases in the areas of equipment purchases, special education teaching positions and things like that, mid-year retirements, and that brought us down a little bit further here. The individual line items, if you were to click here, would take you right to where all the line items are in the budget. So you can walk through the 400 different line items, and you'll see the various comparisons from year to year. And I'm just going to scroll up so I can get back to the face sheet. And student services went up by 100,000. We used to, for the previous 3 years, we had our school resource officer embedded into the ESSER grant. We had this pre-planned that we only have 2 major positions that were tied up in the ESSER funding because we didn't want to tie up salaries knowing that was going to come to an end. So our plan is the school resource officer position, we embedded back into the operating budget with the goal of this April, the COPS grants come out. So we have every intention of trying to apply for that COPS grant, get that money, and then that money that would be extra would flow into the E&D to offset next year's town assessments. So that's how we're kind of looking at that. The other one that we had as a major position in the ESSA grant was the school adjustment counselor, and that money is tied up into our Title I and 240 special education grants, so that has no hit to the budget. In pupil personnel transportation, we had a new 5-year bus contract, which upped that by 11%. You can see the increase rate there. Right now, we have 13 school buses. We are projecting in this budget a 14th, with a slight tick up in enrollment. Right now, since the pandemic, many of our students that are freshmen, parents drive them, so they're in that mode, and they haven't come out of that mode yet. So we have like a line of cars waiting for pickup and drop off every morning that we never had before. Retirement contributions ticked up a little bit. Insurance active employees, we all know that went up. We budgeted 4%. That looks like that's gonna go up to 8% moving forward. Insurance retirees, non-employee insurance, rental lease equipment, capital stabilization. Again, as we indicated last year, we got $750,000 for capital stabilization last year. That used to be our rental lease equipment. That was the 13 HVAC units, new boilers, heating system, $5 million project that we did not go out to bond for, that we embedded into our budget, because in the long run, that saved a lot of money. Well, that just expired the previous year. So that money is now getting put into the capital stabilization fund, so we can try to do the same thing with a pre-planned MSBA feasibility study that will cost upwards of $1.5+ million. So if we can do this through the capital stabilization, then we don't have to go out to bond twice. Once for a feasibility study, then come back to you a year or two later with whatever they tell us what's feasible. Is it a renovation? Is it an atrium? Is it a new school? They'll tell us, but that's gonna require some bonding. So that's where we are with that kind of pre-planning on that one. So we were kind of fortunate that the rental lease equipment expired, which allowed us to then funnel that money into capital stabilization. The debt service, as explained above, and the school choice tuition is usually about 3 students that live in Orange or New Salem that attend Monty Tech for programs that we don't offer. So that's and they have a school choice of about $5,000 or $6,000 per head. So in a nutshell, that's the flyby version. The thing I did want to point you to in this budget that you'll see is we have a whole section we didn't have previously, and that is grant funding. You get to see how we spent all our money since the beginning of the pandemic for the various grants that came up. The CARES Act in 2020 is outlined here, what we spent all the money on. You'll see very few is in positions, because we know those would expire. The next one they've got in 2021, there's all the money we spent. Then the ESSER 2 came out at $386,000 for us. A little paragraph showing you how we spent that, and then there's the little chart. Then the ESSER 3 came out, and it shows you kind of where all that money went for that total down here. And then state entitlement grants overview. These are all the entitlement grants: the IDA, the Perkins Grant, Title I, Title II, the Equitable Access Grant for 427, all the various grants, what those totals are. So everything that we get for resources is now in the budget. Is in the budget book, not in the budget, because all of this information is outside of the operating budget. So, because then people sometimes wonder how we afford things. So when we go down to our competitive and state federal grants, here's where I think we excel. We're able to elicit outside resources that's not entitlement grants that we had to compete for, grant funding. We have totaled $9 million since 2014, in which right now, if you drive by our facility, you'll see a 12,000 square foot steel hangar going up. That's about 34 feet high, and it's the biggest structure on the boulevard. It's huge. We're starting a new aviation program. We plan on starting that in the fall. We've already purchased 5 airplanes, numerous equipment. It's going to be a college-ready program. Kids are going to walk out of there, be able to start their college curriculum as a sophomore. And it's going to rival colleges. Never mind, there's very few high schools in the country that will have this. So we're real excited about that program. And that didn't come from any taxpayers. That's just a competitive grant. So we'll be able to fund that. So that's the that's the magic there. Then you get right into the line item. So with that, I was trying to be brief, but I'm here to answer any questions.
It's an impressive grant for the aviation at 4-point-something million there alone, let alone all the others. Questions, comments?
Yeah, I do have a question. Just a follow-up. You had mentioned a couple of times, so when your layout showed ESSER funds and grants, you leave all those outside, so you don't reduce your budget by whatever those amounts are, correct? You work out of 2 different pots of money, and so you're not embedding those grants in and deducting and keeping your total. Your budget grows based on the amount of grants and revenues and ESSER funds that you get, and you utilize those in a way that you see fit, knowing that they'll expire.
Any grant that's going to expire, so that's different than in your entitlement grants in Title I, Title
Right.
II, those don't expire, they get renewed every single year.
Yeah.
They are, federally sponsored as well. The Perkins grant's another example of that. When we talk about some of those federal grants that come in just to give the economy of the schools a quick little hit and a quick little boost, I don't trust those. So we make sure those are not part of any long-term planning, tied up in salaries, and then at the end of 3 years, we find out we gotta lay off 12 people or 15 people because we didn't pre-plan something that was a known variable ahead of time. So we stayed away from that and wanted to make sure that we tied up in things we could use. We could use that big tent that we bought. We got new HVAC, air filter cleaning units. What does our building need? That's what we got, with the ESSER grant. So you'll see all that in there when you comb through it.
Thank you.
Can I just say that it looks like it's a very complex budget, but a lot of moving parts, but very well expressed, very well organized, at least in my opinion. So thank you for that.
Thank
Makes
you.
it easier to understand. If I'm hearing it right, and please tell me if I'm wrong, in one respect, the state at Chapter 70 told us that it was an increase, but it's really a decrease. I'm told it's a decrease, but it's really an increase for us, which is kind of political doublespeak, I guess, we're kind of get used to. And transportation went down about 65,000.
Correct.
Or so. We can't help that, it is what it is.
We are optimistic that the governor's final numbers that come out at the end of July, we're hopeful those get, for regional transportation, those numbers go back up and we make it flatline there. I would be surprised if it stays there, but right now, our town's only approved what these initial numbers are. So we have to go by what the initial numbers are. If it changes and goes up, we've already spent the money. That money then flows into E&D to offset next year's town assessments.
A question about you mentioned the evening school. Is that fixed lawnmowers, welding, that kind of stuff?
We
Is
have
that something
welding,
different?
we have carpentry, we have auto tech.
Is that part of our budget, or that's paid for by evening school?
That is paid for through a competitive grant. It's the Commonwealth Technical Institute, and students apply through workforce development and attend the program for absolutely free.
Okay. But it's not an assessment to the town?
No.
Okay.
No.
And I have one other comment, not a question. If you've got about $9 million in grants in the since 2014, that's a little bit less than $1 million a year, grant money, it's our money, so thank you for bringing it back to us. It's a good thing, and the question, is there any, it's not part of this budget, I don't want to belabor it much, but is there even a brief comment on new building, new facility, new all that stuff that was in the works some time ago?
Well, that's pretty much what I just talked about a little bit earlier. We are going to be entering into what they call the feasibility stage.
Okay,
We'll be
good.
into that for a few years.
Okay, thank you.
One of the questions that I had, you mentioned that that reduction in funding was going to have to be offset by a reduction in force. Have you identified where that reduction is going to come from?
So what
Is it
we're
a-
looking at, we had a relatively new teacher that was hired at the mid-year point. And we reduced that position and then refilled it with someone in the building that is certified, but doing another capacity that could be covered by other guidance counselors and special education teachers and things on that nature. So we kind of shuffle some people around, but it still is a cut, and that still does happen. And we did eliminate some money we had in the operating budget for evening school instructors and for coordinators. We are doing a very creative way in how we're going to implement the Spanish curriculum, so that was eliminated. So we had other line items in the budget of hundreds of thousands that we had to take out. It would be nice to have, but I had to focus on what's essential. One thing I didn't want to have happen is not have the students impacted by not having a teacher. So we were able to shuffle some things around to make sure that happened.
No, I appreciate that, and I'll echo Dan's comments that this is a very thorough, involved budget, and I'm sure I will have more questions when I have more of a chance to digest it. But thank you for
Thank you.
this detail.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the Erving Elementary School budget.
There are school committee members out in the hallway.
Yep, we have one or some joining. Are you having the whole committee up? You want us to bring up more chairs? We can. Or is it just,
It's an error, so, yeah.
okay, thank you.
Eric, if I'm here. I brought up a chair just in case he wanted to. He just had to step out for a minute. Goodness gracious. Oh, what time is it? Sorry. It's 7:26. I got it.
Welcome.
Welcome, thank you. First and foremost, we're missing Superintendent Kokine and the Finance Director. So we're gonna answer the questions to the best of our ability, but just know that those two key players are not available to us tonight.
Okay.
And that our meeting has resumed at 7:26.
7:26, yep.
Okay, do you want to walk us through the budget?
Sure. What we did, and I'm not sure what you have in front of you, just so,
Document they have is the one dated January 16th.
okay. So what we did was we asked for the budget to be level serviced and then we added back in a,
Adjustment counselor.
adjustment counselor. I always get that title wrong. An adjustment counselor, which is, we don't currently have, we have an ad out, and then we're hoping, you know, to have somebody for next year. We're hoping that this hiring season, spring tends to be a prime time to hire school personnel. We're hoping that they can find a candidate and hire them on for next year. So we put it in the budget with the hopes of hiring somebody for that position. Other than that, we tried very hard to keep it level serviced, and that's why it comes in at just about a 2% increase.
And that adjustment counselor was originally built into the ESSER funding. So we're moving it from ESSER funding, which is ending, into the actual budget, just to clarify that.
So how would you like me to do this? Do you want me to go line by line? Do you have specific areas you want to focus in on?
I think just to speak to the large ones, I think you already talked about maybe one of the largest lines, you know, at line 38, right? It's primarily that, the adjustment counselor moving.
I'm sorry, say, just
Line-
speak up a little
yes.
bit.
Line 38, I think, is the one you were just speaking about, right?
The
With
therapeutic
adjustment-
services?
Yeah, adjustment counselor shift.
I believe that's where that person would go, yeah. And so, again, so obviously one of our biggest costs is salaries, and so those are just going up by the negotiated increases. Our bus, the transportation, as the tech school superintendent mentioned, our transportation costs have gone up with the regular Kismeskis contract. We do have our van. We're hoping to get a driver hired very soon so that we can get that rolling. That will reduce our special education transportation costs. We don't know exactly by how much, because this is going to be brand new for us. It's going to be a little bit of, in flex until we really see what the costs are to run that van, hiring the personnel, gas, those sort of things. So what that all shakes out to be. So that is something that we are giving our best guess to, but just know that that line is a little bit unknown to us because it's brand new for us. Let me see, is there anything else in particular that I can note for you? I think I hit on the biggest ones, but if there's something else that you...
I think there's going to be specific questions, but for an overall, that was good, so we'll open up for questions if you're
Sure,
ready.
sure, yep.
You
I
have some?
I have
please.
some questions.
Yep.
And unfortunately, I'm just gonna ask that maybe you take down the question and bring it back, because I don't think you'll have the answers to
Yeah.
dig into tonight.
Yep.
At your last school committee meeting, I believe it was Mr. Blatchley, you had mentioned how you wanted to really look at building from previous year's actuals and our best effort determination of what the actuals this year would be. And it got me looking between the proposed FY25 budget and the FY24 expenditure report. There's several line items in that don't match up. Lines 36, 37, 38, 43, which they don't have line items, and I'm not going to read off the 12-digit billing code in the expenditure report, but it's the specialist teachers' salaries, regular ed, specialist teachers' salaries, special ed, therapeutic services, and teachers' aides, special education. It's almost a just shy of $75,000 difference that the actual expenditure report is reduced from what was allocated at annual town meeting that was in the budget. And so my question is, it's exactly the opposite of what we just heard from Franklin County. I'm assuming that those line items were reduced because we were using things like ESSER funds or other, grants to support those. but there's no calculation, there's no tabulation of how were we using them, what were we using them for. There's, in the previous budget we just saw from the tech, those are all allocated in there. They'll show us exactly what they're using for ESSER funds. I think our ESSER funds, we had roughly, it's like this last round was like $300,000, $207,000, something like that. But it doesn't show how that's broken out. So when you're trying to look at what are we building off of, and it's nice that there's a line item that says this is for the psychologist, this increase is due to the psychologist, and that it doesn't show how much of the ESSER funds were actually allocated toward that. Was it 100%? Was it 50%? Was it a flat rate fee of $25,000 per position? So it's really hard to say when we're trying to build the budget off of anticipated expenditures, what are those real numbers?
Yeah, so let me give it a try, and you
Sure.
let me know if I'm answering your question. I do know that the adjustment counselor salary was 100% in the ESSER funds, allocated to ESSER funds, right? We didn't have that person, so 100% of their salary, and they were guesstimating 78,
yeah.
somewhere around there, will now be included in our operating budget. And I did ask Caitlin for a breakdown of the ESSER. She did not think she could have it prepared for today, and now she's out sick. So I am interested as well in where the ESSER funds are allocated, and what the breakdown is. So
Yeah,
that is something
and just
that
to
I'm
go a
looking
little
for as
further on
well.
that, lines 47 and 49 show a decrease because they say there's ESSER funds that were no longer available. Respectively, it's 5,000 and 3,500, but I don't know if that whole line was allocated to ESSER funds, or if only that 5,000 and 3,500 was pulled from the ESSER funds. It's not clear about how much, because if it was the whole line item, but it only saw a $5,000 reduction, that means that it's actually an increase to the operating because you're offsetting the rest of it. So, but it's
Yeah.
not clear on what the explanation.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
and it only gives 100 characters on the right-hand side of what the explanation is instead of a narrative, so it's hard to follow.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Scott, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I think, yeah, I'll hold off on anything else I have. Go ahead.
Okay. So Mackenzie, you're saying that adjustment counselor, which was paid for ESSER, was approximately $78,000. Why is that line increasing by almost 112 for line 38? If that's moving that counselor into that, I'm sorry, line 38.
Yeah, so I did ask that as well. There is a PT that was taken, that we had in like outside contracted service. It's now, they've now hired somebody, so that's going up. I would have to look at my
Were there
notes.
steps?
Yeah, there were, there's of course the steps and the COLAs. And I think there was one more thing, I'd have to check back in my notes, but I did ask that because it was a huge increase. And that's the answers I got, was that there was a person included.
Yeah.
And then steps and COLA. And I want to say there was one more thing, so I'll have to get back to you on that answer.
Okay. If
But
we-
I did ask that question, there was a clear answer.
Okay, great, thank you.
So that add to staff, the PT, that was in '24, or that's being added in '25?
So they were partially, I think it was a mid-year addition, and so the full salary worth would now be in fiscal '25. They didn't have it, we didn't have it this full year. Does that answer your question?
And do you know, is that a full FTE and a benefited a position? And if so, have they budgeted for that?
It's not, let me come back to you with that answer, because I
Okay.
don't want to answer you I don't want to answer you wrong. I will ask that.
And you said that was a contracted service before? So we should see a reduction somewhere else to
It was
offset
an
that?
outside contracted service before, yes, I believe that was the answer, yep.
I had a question on 29. Seems like a significant increase at 11%. I know it's on clerical salary. Is there a change there?
That's a increase due to looking at the other clerical salary in the union. We had to, much like you guys had kind of that wage study and you corrected, we had to correct that salary.
Thank you.
And did that include both of them, or just?
It's just the one, I believe.
Okay.
But the other one goes up just because, like everything else, they get a percentage.
Right, I just wasn't sure where the other staff member was allocated for.
So,
Oh, no, sorry, that is, no.
I have a line of questions, but I'm gonna start small and work my way up. And if
Sure.
you will, just bear with me, because some of these are relatively small items, but a wise man once told me, if you watch the pennies, the dollars will watch themselves. So in line 16, office supplies for the union, we have a 16.7% increase. And the explanation for that is an increase in cost for supplies. This being in a time when we're doing more and more digital, so I would think we're spending less on paper and less on toner and less on pens and whatnot.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Union 28 budget is approved before we kind of see the whole budget. It's kind of an interesting way of doing it. And so we now don't have control over going back and changing anything that had to do with Union 28. I don't know specifically what their rationale was for increased supplies. I don't know what supplies they're talking about, but I can get you that answer.
Okay, so, and I guess why that's a concern for me is if you compare that to line 31, where office supplies are tied to actual instructional purposes, there's no increase there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering how, if our focus is on the kids and instruction would be directly tied to the kids, how are we level funding that? And on an admin level, we're increasing that line item budget by close to 17%. And that is not an answer that I'm expecting you to provide, but
Sure. Yeah, the only thing I will say is the office supplies, I believe, just to clarify, are truly like the front office supplies, not supplies that children would necessarily be needing. It's not your pencils and crayons and that sort of thing. But I hear your question.
So I apologize, I'm new to the seat, and I just read it under instruction, so I affiliated that
Yeah,
with the line.
no, that's fine.
And now, line 30, in copier maintenance, that's up 150% over last year. That maintenance going from $6,000 to $9,000. And then down in line 52, we have a copier lease increase of over 28% from FY '24. Is that maintenance based on usage, or are we spending money on constantly repairing and putting Band-Aids on a dinosaur of a copier, or what are we?
All good questions. I don't know the answer to. I do know the copier rental, I mean, like everything that went up, so we don't have control over that one. But certainly the copier maintenance, we can ask that question. What does that entail? It did go up. They budgeted 6,000, but it did actually come out at more like 75. So I'm assuming that is because they're anticipating with inflation and everything else, that number's now gonna be around 9, but I can get a better answer for you.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow up before you go?
Sure, I'm sorry, I'm on a roll, like I told you.
No, I just want to make sure
I
you
got
didn't mind.
sleep
I'll note it
last
down
night,
if you
I'm
don't.
sorry, I'm just all fired up, full of energy tonight.
I don't want to get in the way.
No,
but
go ahead.
If you're good.
I will yield to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Just on the copier lease, I guess I would just be curious that for the last 2 prior years, we were flat at 57.48 exactly, and then suddenly it went up. Maybe it's a new contract, I don't know, but
It says increase in copier contract is what
Yeah.
the note says, so I'm guessing
Sure,
that
I-
the actual contract with the lease company has increased.
okay. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you. So moving to line 54, the field trip budget, it shows decreased by $2,000, I believe, and the comment was there was an inquiry about having other departments fund that, and I believe at our last meeting, Concom proposed that, and I know Deb and I don't know anybody else specifically, but we indicated we weren't in favor of that, and we didn't take any formal votes or whatnot, but I just asked that you revisit that item, knowing that.
It is, it's an error. It should be 10,000, and we'll adjust that 2,000, find it somewhere else. It was reported back that we wanted that to go back up to 10,000. I'm not sure where the miscommunication happened, but we'll have that adjusted accordingly.
Yeah, it was brought up at the last meeting.
Yep,
To move it back up.
yep, it was.
Are there plans to double the amount that we've been doing in the coming year? Because it looks like we've only been spending less than half of that historically.
No, part of that is because we were in COVID years and people weren't going anywhere. The assumption is that now that we have, kind
We will.
of come over that hump, that will start to be utilized more, and with all the rising costs of everything, including the busing, that actually 10,000 really honestly doesn't go very far. So once you start getting into field trips, so,
So yes, we hope to expect to see that increase, the quantity or frequency of.
we hope to see that being spent down. Is that?
Yes,
Okay.
we're on the same page. Thank you.
So, moving on, and I just want to preface this by saying that some of these questions have been asked of me by people in the town who, for reasons, are reluctant to ask questions themselves. So I will, on their behalf, I will bear that. I'm trying to be very mindful and respectful of some of the adversarial tones that have been going back and forth at different times between the school and town and whatnot. So I'm going to try and frame some tough questions in a respectful manner so as to not fuel any of those flames. But line 35, we have classroom teachers' salaries at just over $1 million. Can you tell me how many classroom teachers that is for?
Yeah, we can in just a minute. We're gonna grab that piece of information for you.
Okay.
Do you want to go on and we'll loop back?
And I'll say it's the same questions for line 35 through 38. 38, I guess we've already addressed, so we can skip over that.
Yep.
But while that's being gathered, I'll just jump ahead. Lines 45 through 48, I see professional development for substitutes and contracted services, 17,500, 15K of which is for contracted services, down from 25. And that is all indicating for substitutes, regular ed, special ed. What I'm not seeing, and maybe because it's my first time looking at these in a granular level, but I don't see any professional development line item specified for regular ed, for classroom teachers and special ed. It all is just indicated through substitutes.
So line 47, professional development contracted services. So that 15,000 would be any outside person that comes in to do professional development for regular ed or special ed, just, the population in general. So that would come under that. Does that answer your question?
Okay, no, that does. Like I said, I saw that they were specified in those other lines, and I didn't, where those are labeled and framed that way,
Yep.
up above, there's, regular ed, special ed, and then substitute. So these were specified as substitute. I guess I just expected to see them labeled the same way, but no, that answers that question.
Yeah, and even line 45 and 46, we've asked why it is that they have kind of been pulled apart like that. And it's, I believe Caitlin answered that it was partly due to the way that she has to report it. So they had to kind of delineate between whether it was a substitute for professional development for regular ed or whether it was a substitute for professional development for a special ed staff member to do whatever it is that they were doing. So it was more of a reporting, like we need to report it this way or that way on different forms, so they had it broken out into different lines.
If I might give a little clarity, I'm assuming you're thinking that line is somebody giving professional development to the substitutes. And I just want to be clear that it is not, it is the salary, it's just a way to delineate, they called in a sub.
Yep.
Whether they called in a sub because the teacher used a personal day or was out sick, that goes in the regular substitute line up above. But if they called in to use the substitute to fill in for a teacher because
If they were going to a
they were going to a
conference, if they
for
were going to a
professional development,
workshop.
they have to allocate that to a different line item. So it's, you
Okay.
can look at them as a conglomerate, but they report them differently.
Yeah,
So
Okay.
the two salary ones are substitutes to fill teachers who are out doing
For,
professional
yeah, when the
development.
teachers
So
are
it's not
doing
actually
profession-
for development, it's for the
Correct.
No.
subs in place
If
of.
I'm reading that correctly,
Yep,
that's
that is,
exactly what
that
that
is
line
correct.
item is for.
It is
Wanna
a
make sure I was on the same
substitute
page.
because they're not gonna be in the building or they're not gonna be in their classroom doing professional development.
As opposed to,
As
they're
opposed to
not in
just
the classroom for
personal or
a
sick time.
multitude of other reasons.
Yep.
That makes much more sense than the way that I read it as
Okay.
as a rookie pass. So
Sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good question.
Good answer.
Did you
I can-
do the math?
I did not do any math.
Okay, you do the math and we'll get
Well,
back to you.
you can sum it up, and he said they will be using the same number of teachers next year.
Right, but they want to know how many.
Oh, if you want to know which ones they are, and there was one that they weren't sure where they were going to place them.
Yeah, we're just counting up bodies, not, or positions, I should say, not.
I think there's 10 classroom teachers, a music teacher at 0.7 FTE, full-time PE, full-time plus 0.05 tech, 0.4 FTE art, 0.34 ELA, ELL, sorry, I always do that.
That's okay.
3 mentor stipends and 1 teacher in charge stipend.
Excuse me, isn't a stipend like a one-time thing, or?
Yes, so if you're just, I think they're just asking the bodies, so.
Right, but in that line item, all of this is taken out. So you
Okay.
can't just like divide it by or, knowing
Yeah,
that there
no,
are
that's a
3
good point.
separate stipends in there and there's a teacher in charge amount in there
That's a good point.
along with those staff.
So you can't really tell us how many teachers there are?
Yes, we can,
One,
yep.
So line,
10.
You have the number?
Oh, it says
13.49.
13.49, but some of them are classroom teachers, some are special teachers. So
but
the
so-
FTEs are not
Right,
all the same.
but the classroom teachers you said was 10?
10.
That would be line 35?
And all of those special teachers and the stipend. They're saying classroom teachers, salary, regular ed line is everything under there.
Is all of those things that we just listed out. Does that make
The
sense to you?
13.49.
49.
and that's line 35.
Right, so that includes 13.49 people, plus the cost of the mentor stipends and the teacher in charge stipend.
Okay.
That sound right?
So then line 36, the specialists?
Specialist teachers, is that what it says? Specialist teachers, salary, regular ed. So, two reading specialists, a math coach at a .80 FTE, and a math coach at a full FTE, so 2.8.
1.8?
There's two, it should be three, actually, isn't
So
it?
3.8 total?
Should be 3.8.
You said
'cause there's two
2.8
reading
and one
specialists.
3.8,
Yes.
right?
Yes, 3.8,
three.
sorry.
It's wrong
Yep,
on here.
It is wrong on there.
No, that's fine. It's, and then line 37, specialist sped is,
3 student support teachers and a data stipend. Yeah. So 3 and a data stipend.
okay. So, got 13.5, 3.8, and 3 for those 3 line items?
And I have your, sorry, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's, I've just, line 35 is 13.49, 36 is 3.8, and 37 is 3.
And then I also have your answer about line 38, sorry, the therapeutic services,
Right. Okay.
when you're ready.
Scott was asking, that the same line item, you good?
Somebody was asking who was in it. We have the information. I just
Okay.
wanted to answer that question.
Yeah, it might
You
have been
want-
me. I think we were talking about, or maybe that was Deb, I don't know, about the 78, and then what's the other 30,000 increase we were asking before?
Yep. So, we added an adjustment counselor. We added a BCBA. We have an adjustment counselor. We have a .6 OT, occupational therapist. We have a .23 physical therapist, and 2 speech and language pathologists. And I apologize, before I said, I was talking about physical therapist, it's the physical therapist is only a .23, so there's no benefits, but it's the BCBA that was added as a full-time, not a physical therapist. So I apologize for that confusion. So it comes out to be 4.83 full-time equivalent.
Mackenzie, do you, the specialist teacher salaries for the student support, we have 3 currently? I thought we only had 1. I thought it was Mr. Hanson was the one.
I'm sorry, say that again, the where?
It's in the breakdown of your budgeted positions for FY '25, the student support. It
Yep.
says ×3.
Yep.
But in the current budget, I think there was only 1. We only have 1 person in that position, Mr. Hanson.
I think he's
That's why I'm not
That's-
sure. Just his title
I
says
believe that is
teacher
a-
student support. So that's all I can go off of. I don't know what it actually.
I think the person you're speaking about is in the specialist teacher salary,
Oh, okay. All right. So
the regular ed specialist. I think that's the math coach.
okay. It doesn't say that on there. It just says teacher student support. So I didn't know.
Yeah,
I thought it was under that one where it says student support under specialist. I was just confused. There's just, to be frank, between the FY25 Erving budgeted positions that you're reviewing, the one that they sent you in a PDF form with all the different breakdowns of the FTEs,
Yep,
the line items for the budget presented, and the line items for how they get attributed to an expenditure report, none of them, there's no easy, A is A, B is B, here's the revenue, here's what the expenses are, here's what the total is. They're all different, they all pull different ways, and so when we're critiquing, we've been critiquing everybody's budget, we're trying to say, like, just show us where the need is, like how you got there, so that we can say, this is how it was built, and this
Yep.
is why, and thank you for building it and explaining it all. Check, move on, there's the dollar amount, and we move on. It's hard to do that with this budget because it's just not, it's not lining up the same way. Especially when we pull out money after it's been approved at town floor and then start the expenditure report at a lower amount. I don't know how to build off of that. It makes it very difficult. And to the tune of almost $75,000, which is huge. So,
I hear
there's
you.
a, seems to be, there needs to be, it would be nice to show in a line item there in the budget that said, nowhere in there is the ESSER funds. We show a conglomerate of the total, like Title I, and all those federal grants that we get every year. Those are coming in every year.
Yep.
But these one times that we allocated operating budget line items and salaries to, there's no delineation. So if they did pull them off of what was approved at town floor and are paying those out of grant funds, then we are not seeing, we're not seeing that in the actual budget that's being requested. So we're seeing like an imbalance of how was it funded last year and why, that might explain the $111,000 increase, but it's not in there to be able to look back on.
Is there something I can ask of Caitlin to be clearer, other than the ESSER breakdown, which I have already noted?
Yes. You could ask, so of lines 36, 37, 38, and 43,
36,
37,
Yep.
38, and 43,
yep,
those salary positions, or some of them are paras, so those aren't salary, but they're hourly. But those four line items have a different starting balance in the expenditure report of FY24 than they did in the approved budget from FY24. So we're starting at a different position, which means it would indicate to me that the funding source is not raise and appropriation funds if they're not putting it in the expenditure report, which tells me that there's somewhere that difference is getting paid. These are people, they're here, they're getting paid, but how? And so that we can then trace that and say, oh, okay, so we had these three positions that totaling, this one was 78,000, which people have talked about, the adjustment counselor, and there was this one, and this one, and this one, and that totals this. These were all paid by ESSER funds, and that's why it's reduced by X amount. But even those, if we were to earmark some of those, they don't add up.
okay,
Clarity on how much of line 47 and 49 was attributed to ESSER funds, because I don't know based on the narrative they gave. Is it the full amount, or is it just the 5,000 and 3,500 that they reduced?
okay.
I think. Yeah, so, and then couple that with trying to balance, I know some of this does get eaten up, not some, all of this and then some, I should be very clear, will be eaten up by COLAs, steps, lane changes. I know those are coming, and there's, funds in there. but just those 4 line items will show a surplus of almost $49,000 at the end of FY '24. And there's various reasons for that. People leave, take unpaid, the position wasn't filled, it's going to be filled again. So some of those, there's absolutely reasons why we'll have a surplus at the end, and that surplus won't remain for the next year. But in years past, we got more thoughtful narratives about what that is. We don't have that narrative to justify it.
Okay.
If you look at those and we say, yes, there's 48, we can't budget for that decrease because when we reposition those people in the next year at a full 1 FTE, we have to allocate for that. But while they might have been 0.7 this year for whatever reason, they're going to be 0.1 next year. So we can't drop it just because we didn't spend it. We have to keep it there because it's going to be,
Sure.
But that narrative would have been nicer so that we could at least justify some of the nuanced pieces of it.
Okay. Yeah, we did have personnel go out on leave, and then, so that, changed how much was potentially getting paid and things like that. So definitely a clear picture of what that looks like.
Did you have one? Not at this time.
I have a wish list right now comprised of one wish. I wish there were 400 or 500 families in Erving watching this every week so they'd understand better that finance, select board, capital planning, we don't just prove whatever anybody comes in here with. There's a lot of questions asked about it in the process. So I think some people just don't understand that, and if they watch this, it would help them understand it better. I may look at things a little differently, but, and catch me up if I've lost a couple of years here. But there used to be, is an IEP, is that individual education plan
Plan,
per
yep.
student? And that's worked out between parents, administrators, what's best for my kid. And whether it's physical therapy, occupational speech, whatever, most of those fall into that category of
Yes.
not just some classroom teacher says we ought to call up the specialist and help Johnny or Susie. It's so, and when a parent requests it, I don't know that every student in the school has it, but when parents request it, as I understand it, then we're required to put one of those plans in place and then follow the plan. And if that's the case, then most of this $111,000, good to have the detail and a consistent process of understanding it, but most of this $111,000 increase, I would think, would be because of those IEPs, things that students actually need. You're shaking your head, yes, I guess
Yeah,
I'm right.
for the most part, yeah.
And so we're up 111,000 in one area, we're down 78,000 in transportation and maybe more. With
Yep.
their own van, it might be more, to offset much of that 111,000 increase. And I certainly appreciate what Selectman Loyne said about watch the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. But also, I think it's important, when we're talking about percentages, to let people know, there is a line that went up 16%, that's true. But it's $251 out of a $4 million budget. So they understand how many dollars the percentages are. And overall, the big umbrella of everything here, as I'm seeing it, is the entire school budget is increasing about 2%.
Two, yeah.
Okay, I like that better than 16.
Yeah, yeah, and I will say that this is, there are still some moving parts. We don't have our preschool numbers in yet, so we don't know. Currently, we have 2 preschools. Depending on the numbers, that may change. So that could change some things, and there's some other things. So it's slightly still a moving target for a little bit longer until we have some more information for us, so.
I only have one other question. It may not be directly related to the budget, so I don't want to take up a lot of extra time. You may not answer it today, maybe there is no answer. But there are people who look at how many students we have, what's the total budget, and they just divide it. They say, well, here's our cost per student. There's a whole bunch of things that go into that. It's misleading sometimes, like one fellow told me, well, with regard to test scores, that if somebody or kids or their parents decide they don't take the test, it's just, I don't know, reported as a 0 or something, which drops the test scores. Looks like everybody's test scores is less. But is there a school committee process where you routinely or occasionally look at the cost per student here as opposed to the other Union 28 or the state average per student? We somewhere in the ballpark. And it's like trying to get a good firm hold on Jell-O to determine how our test scores compare, because you got a half a dozen kids who don't take the test and the scores average come up with some zeros in it. How are you gonna compare that? But is there some ongoing comparison that people just don't look at this hard number of here's how much per student? Is there a reason why it may be higher than state average or other schools?
We did just, let's see, it is February, was it January meeting? Have the curriculum and instruction, I may have that title slightly incorrect, coordinator come and kind of talk to us about test scores, actually, just what you were talking about, and how Erving fared comparatively, and talked about what we're going to be doing going forward to address some of the concerns that had come up. So I'm optimistic that we will see some improvements in our test scores going forward. We do have a healthier budget than the other Union 28 schools. That's not necessarily meaning that we're spending too much. It just means that we are fortunate enough to be able to have a healthier budget than some of the other schools. So I know that we're looking very closely at this budget. I know that it is a very big budget. And that's why I kind of wanted to preface it by saying that we still do have some moving parts that may impact this budget, not going up, but potentially going down. So I think that's important to note. We haven't made any decisions, so I don't want to, give any sort of false hope or anything, but just know that we do, we have been looking very closely at where we can thoughtfully trim this budget so it makes sense for the voters and the taxpayers, but also meet the needs of our students.
I just had one other comment that mainly for folks who may be watching this, and I hope more people will watch, that much like the other school budgets, tech school and secondary education, it's a complex budget. You got 131 lines of things you're trying. You have administrators doing it, but trying to keep track of a lot of lines, a lot of things, and it's just not easy to accomplish, and still end up at a roughly 2% increase. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I do have one other
Yep, go ahead.
comment, and it's nothing that you can answer. It's more of a question that you could have at your next meeting with the superintendent and the financial people from Union 28 is, I know you've asked many times, looking at encumbrances, and I'm looking down at the FY24 so we can build from like solid numbers this year. And I'd say at least 70% of the big numbers are driven by, salaries, transportation, out of district placement. There's just a large number of those in there. All of which have been encumbered except for transportation, which is about $60,000. And I'm sure that's going to get paid out for whatever reason that one didn't get encumbered. But your expenditure report looks like after encumbrances, you could be looking at just shy of $600,000 in surplus. That's based on the report that was done last Monday. So a little more definition on all of the other line items that were not encumbered and how much they anticipate of that it would take out of the current surplus. Some are encumbered partially, so there are known bills, they've had services.
Yeah.
Those bills are pending, so it's encumbered. But there's an anticipation that probably the rest of that line item will be used. The narrative of talking about how much of that and what do they anticipate for the end of the year, because then you're looking at actuals for 24 and building it off of that. not building it off of, or the best anticipated actuals, which is hard to do in, February of the school year. You're only about a little over 50% there, but, so that's my ask is, it looks like based on the expenditure report, like I said, minus the transportation, which I'm sure should have been encumbered, because we know that's a fixed cost that we're gonna spend.
Yeah.
That 60,000 would probably most likely come out, but that still leaves out of the 657,000, roughly 595, 597 after encumbrances of all known salaries, known fixed costs. How much of that do they anticipate and where?
Yep. Yes, and I actually did ask that question again, kind of in preparation of this, and the answer I got, and then of course I haven't been able to follow up with Caitlin since. It's a little bit has to do with the software that is being used. I actually even attempted to get a clearer answer from Brian, just because I'm not as familiar with the software and how it has to look and how it works. So I do think that there may be more, and it's just the way that it's shows.
So part of what I know about the encumbrance in this software is they can't physically put it in the encumbrance, because that is done after the vendor warrant is created, and that's what drives the payment. But I'm looking for just a secondary sheet that is an encumbered in an Excel spreadsheet. Like, here's our narrative with an adjoining Word document that says, I can't encumber it in this expenditure report,
Yeah,
because that's
okay,
going to
but
mess our line
but
items
for
up.
our
and
sake-
There's no warrants to do that with, and it'll really mess everything up for the rest of the year. But here's the narrative of how we plan, how we intend to spend that, and here's what we
Sure.
think the end number will be. That's all.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Just kind of note on that, I feel like, at least from the finance committee perspective, we're only getting half the data because we don't have that report. And unlike every other department, when they submit their budgets, we do get their FY24 totals up until the time they pull their budgets. So that could be sent to the finance committee, so we can see it.
We do get it, so I can send it to
Okay,
you.
that would be
Yep.
fantastic.
Or I can have it sent to you. Yep.
And is there a reason why that information is not automatically provided?
I don't know why it's, I didn't know you weren't getting it, so
Okay.
I'll follow up on that.
Okay, thank you. And then I do have a question. I've noticed a couple of notes here online. Oh, let's see, let me line this up, make sure I'm looking at the right one. I think it is 70 and 74. There's, line 74 looks like it has almost $9,000 extra in the line for food service. Historically, at I think that's 23, I have to scroll. 23 only spent about 18,000, and FY 24 the budget was moved to 26,000. The notes for those two lines are lines used for transfers at end of year.
Yep.
That feels a little bit like we're padding some lines to keep some money aside.
So I asked about that.
Okay.
And let me tell you what I know. So the food service has this line, but then it also has and I hope that I'm using the right term, a revolving account. Do you remember this, right?
Yes. You're correct.
And I right?
Yes.
Am I correct on that?
You're-
Okay.
you're correct.
Because I didn't want to use the wrong term. And so that's where the ins and outs, so it's much more efficient, from my understanding, to use that line. And then this line at the end kind of reconciles that line. And so the answer I got was that is a more efficient way to use it than trying to pull it off of this line throughout the year. Does that answer your question?
So,
Or can I ask a follow-up question?
do you want me to add to it? So there's a lot of reimbursements that happen for the food service program. So
Yeah.
the expenses and those revenues come into the revolving fund.
Okay.
Erving has always, or actually for many years, subsidized the rest of the program, so the free food program has existed. And that line item is used to balance whatever the deficit is in the revolving fund. So at the end of the year, the revolving fund should be zero,
Okay.
and this line item is used to make that transfer in June.
So the revolving fund takes in all of the grants and other subsidies for the lunch, and we don't charge, so there's no receipts And then the difference, if it's negative, is covered by what's in here.
Correct.
Okay.
And so that number can
Is
be
that right?
different from year to year depending on
Okay.
all of those variables.
So it's basically the net of reimbursements for free lunch
Correct. Yeah.
is off, whatever that, okay.
Your reimbursement costs are fixed and your food costs are very variable depending on supply chain issues and
Right,
other
exactly.
things, so.
Usage and,
Because I was wondering too, how it was that we were not using anything out of that line for
Right,
the entire
right.
year. And that was how it was explained to me. It sounds like a more efficient way to deal with that.
Same with after school. That line
Mm-hmm.
of 5,000.
There's a
Yes,
revolving account.
There's a revolving after-school account.
Okay.
That they do a lot of that transactional stuff, and if they need to, they'll pull from that.
Correct.
Okay.
And they work with the town accountant to reconcile those accounts at the end of the year.
Thank you, Brian, for helping to clarify that.
Of course.
I know we got updated insurance numbers today, or there was a comment about them at least. The adjustment counselor that hasn't been hired yet, hopes to be back in the budget for next year. Do we know if that's incorporated into the budget for, in terms of capacity for benefits?
So I need to better understand, as you all were having that conversation, I made a note. I need to better understand, I was told that we've hired for the position, but this is a new position.
Right, so what ended up happening was the ad went out and it was titled 3 different things to just see if we could capture at least one. We captured a adjustment counselor, nope,
BCBA.
BCBA, thank you. I don't know why I have such issues with those. And so that's in place now. Then the recommendation was to continue to try and look for an adjustment counselor to fit the needs that we have right now in the school. So that is
An additional FTE?
an additional person, yep.
So then the answer to your question is no.
Okay.
We originally, to what the chairman's talking about, we originally had put some additional capacity in benefits, hoping that the increase from the insurance group would be reasonable. I think we were working with a 2% number, and it came in a
Little
week
over
ago
eight.
at 8%.
8% plus.
So a lot of that capacity that we had budgeted to address things like this have now been eaten by the 8% increase. So
So, how does the hiring process work for the school? Because I feel like, and this is a conversation that comes up quite a bit, it feels like there is a large disconnect between the school hiring and then the person getting benefits and making sure, and I know that came kind of to a head in general for the town as a whole last year when we thought we were out of benefit money. And I'm just concerned, it still feels like that disconnect is happening, and so with budgeting being as tight as it looks like it's going to be, if positions are being hired, frankly, in any department, and they're not communicating that clearly, and then all of a sudden we have to scramble to hire benefits, to find benefit money, I guess I'm asking, where is the breakdown happening? That the communication isn't happening and these things aren't getting to the proper departments that need to be aware of this? Because now, as it stands, what we budgeted for FY25 for insurance with this new update of the 8%, we don't have this person in the budget, period, and yet they're onboarding. So how does that get reconciled, or is that something that the school is going to come forth and say, we hired this person, we know the town doesn't have the budget in the insurance for it, and the benefits for it, so the school is going to take that expense on?
Yeah, I fully am open to more, a better way to communicate this. Just to be clear, this person hasn't been hired yet. It's a position that we are hoping to hire, but I understand your point about how is that communicated better. I agree.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think it's a disconnect. There's a lot of disconnects there, I think, but the biggest one to me is whether or not there's money in the school budget for the salary. That's not the total cost of the employees.
Sure.
There's probably another $1 million in benefits that is exclusively for school,
Yep.
or some portion thereof. I mean, we're at just under 1.3 in the budget this year. And really, it probably wasn't enough to cover the employees we have, very close. And just to cover increases and the actual expected number, because we know some deferred, we're talking a 14% increase. The whole entire 2.5% increase year over year only has a capacity for 25%, but increase in benefits and nothing else going up. That'd be it. I mean, we're getting pretty close to that, just in health insurance benefits, right? And so, let alone anything else. No COLAs, no salaries, no anything. So I just say that to say, over almost $200,000 increase in benefits just to get to where we need to be. And if then the position count that's providing capacity for isn't the position count that people are hiring for, we're scrambling and we don't want to be there. And I'm concerned when the significant benefit cost doesn't live in the budget that has the salaries. So then when it looks like it's covered, it's really not, potentially. It creates a, big liability, potentially. It's not yours to solve right now, but just I think that's the biggest concern there, is it's a big portion of it.
I believe there was some discussion last year of moving benefits to the school.
Yes, we did, and we asked about that, and our answer was not at this time. So we didn't budget for that, but we do know that, I remember that conversation. Yep.
Right.
It's not that you all can't do that and move benefits to the cost centers. I think the communication is the issue. So I don't know that we need to have complicated accounting structures to address a communications breakdown. Typically in the budget planning process, the way I'm made aware that a department has the intention to add staffing, it comes in the narrative. To date, I haven't received a narrative from the school department, and I've sent a few reminders.
Yes, I saw
I've
those.
copied on them. So
Yes.
it's usually the significant budget changes part of the narrative would say we're requesting an increase or a decrease or something of that nature. So I was not aware. But it's not that we can't go back and look at what those costs would look like to make the necessary adjustments so that you all can have that information.
That was going to be something I was going to mention, is we don't have a narrative for the
I-
year, but it sounds like you're aware.
I am aware.
Okay.
Yep.
Can I ask with regard to Deb's question about communication, what would the process be when the school is working on possibly hiring somebody and X amount of money they expect maybe in benefits and stuff? Does that go like to the administrator and then that gets spread out to the treasurer or us or whoever it's supposed to go to? Is there a route in place for that information to follow?
So it would be true for any appointing authority. So there's several appointing authorities throughout the town. If an appointing authority is planning to change either a non-benefited part-time under 20 hours to above, or if they're looking to change their staffing complement and add FTEs, the protocol is typically to bring that through the budgetary process, make sure that all the decision makers, including FinCom Select Board, are aware, so that you all can inform the budget planning process and put that money in the 900 group, which is where benefits are funded. I get that information through the budget requests that come in December. So when all of your materials are being drafted, we're trying to take account, work with the treasurer's office to get those cost estimates. So in December, when we receive the numbers that we have from the different departments, we put together our cost estimate and our proposal based on that. This was one place where I didn't have it. So typically that's how it comes through. All of this is a moving target, so that doesn't mean just because you ask in November or December that it doesn't change by February. It can change. But it usually comes through a communication from the appointing authority. The school is obviously a more complex department, and so you have more decision makers at different levels. And so I would hope that the school committee would be in support of a request to add FTEs before I'm being asked to make sure that we have budget money for it. So hopefully there's a communication happening between administration and school committee before it comes to us.
But I think that's in the budget process. If you're asking, how does that happen through the year as people get hired? Is that?
Pretty much, if
Yeah,
any
so
department thinks they're gonna hire somebody.
there is a
who
process and there's paperwork, and, we're working on it, but unfortunately, we often hear after they're here working that they exist and need to be paid and need to be added, so.
Okay, this process.
Part of the
in place.
communication challenges that we're working on.
I'm fine. I have one other question. With insurance going up about 8%.
Right.
What's the number that it's gonna be 8% of roughly? Do we know? One current?
1 point, oh.
So we haven't adjusted what we've asked you for budgetary dollars on the insurance. we had some capacity for some plan changes. So as of right now, that 8% has eaten that
No, but
cushion put there.
he's asking, what's the 8% base on its 1.2 million?
Oh, okay, sorry,
So-
misunderstood.
So it's
that's-
$100,000,
Yes,
basically.
that increase is gonna be almost $100,000.
Agreed.
And I just say this for the audience, that's one more thing that we don't have much control over.
Agreed.
When insurance companies increase,
Right.
unless we decide to cut everybody's benefits, we don't think we want to put that on the table. When the insurance companies increase, it's one of those things we have very little control over. They do what they do, and it is what it is to pay the cost. It's
Yeah,
not
there's a lot of
any us
factors that go
deciding
into
we just
that.
want to pay more.
Right. Claim history, the costs of providing services, there's several external factors that come into that assessment.
Right.
The town is one of 70-plus participants in the group insurance, so we're one vote at the table, and we're very fortunate to have the plans that we have.
And I asked a question similar to Select Board Member Lloyd that people ask me occasionally, not every day, but occasionally. You know, why are we spending so much money? Well, you know, when insurance goes up $100,000, or there's students who have needs, and we're required by law to meet the needs, it is what it is. And it's not like we've got 3 extra backhoes down the town barn waiting to be used. We're not just throwing away money, my opinion anyways.
We all played off your last question. Did you have another one?
Yeah.
Okay. We kind of went down that road a ways. I just want to make sure we circle back. Other questions? I know we've spent a lot of time and asked for a lot of follow-up.
I guess I do have another question. Mark, you brought up at the school committee meeting the other night, you were talking about the previous fiscal years and the amount of funding that's returned by the school. I'm just wondering, how are you guys taking that into account in this budget season? Because it's historically at least, give or take, about $100,000 a year. And if I'm looking at this correctly here, your ask from the town this year is about $81,000. And so to me, that kind of sort of feels like what you're returning negates what you're asking for. So is there truly an ask? Like, can this 81,000 be absorbed within the budget that you currently have? Because that's what you're kicking back every year. And I gotta be honest, looking at some of these amounts, and I know these are piddly, but when I'm seeing $37, $1, $125 in some of these categories on a nearly 4.1, those numbers can't be absorbed somehow? Especially with what's being returned at the end of the year every year?
So I'll just refer back to my comment about moving parts a little bit.
Yep,
That's one of the things certainly on our radar.
okay.
Yep. And then two, we have the special education line that we created. Not that we are looking to pad to put into that, but that is one place that we are going to look to put some of the overage, if there are any,
Okay.
if there is any.
Okay, I'm really done now.
Any other operating budget questions? We should talk about capital before we get in secondary. I mean, I wasn't part of those discussions, so I don't know where we start, because you don't have any capital requests in this year. But they're capital.
Yeah,
capital
what about it?
requests. You don't have any in this year, but they're, right? Or am I wrong?
Oh, no, you're right, but I'd like an explanation as to why that is.
Okay, and so I know the meetings happened, I wasn't at them. I know there's discussion about there is a big capital issue and need or ask or project coming, and that discussion, I haven't seen a request. Don't know of any that have been submitted, so I think that was one question, is why was there no capital request this year from the school? And then secondly, we need to at least talk high level about what the roof issue and where we're at on that whole thing. Is that
So I don't have a good answer for your first question.
Okay.
We have had a discussion about the roof and the first steps, and that is to get a study done, right? A feasibility. Yes?
Yep.
Okay. Again, I don't want to use the wrong
No, you're right.
word here. And so we're looking to have FERCog potentially help us procure that person, that company to do that for us. So we are making small headway into this project. That we were going to be looking at our own budget to help fund, but obviously the much bigger elephant in the room is the cost of the repairs and repairs or replacement. And we won't know what that is until we get further into it a little bit more. But clearly our budget is not going to be able to support that. So we will be looking to have more discussions about that with capital planning and, with you. There has been a lot of delay. And so we are not as far along in this process as we had hoped to be, as we want to be. But I think we finally are on a pathway. And again, hopefully with FERCog and Brian's help, we can make some inroads into this project.
But
I think
so
Brian
that's
wanted to
roof.
add.
Yeah, no, I know, hang on.
Okay.
I will call him when he does, when I'm done. 1 second. So that's the roof, and we're hoping the feasibility study funding can come out of the budget, sounds like, that you can find that money
Yep.
to help with that,
That's our hope, yep.
the current budget. There was an HVAC, right, thing going on at this, or a little earlier, and I don't know where that's at. I don't think I've seen a request for that either, and I think that was grant funding for a feasibility. Is that where that was?
Yes, and I'm actually going to ask to defer to Brian because he has a little bit more information about this than I'm going to be able to give you.
Get to go sooner than I expected.
The challenge, the balance that you're all going to have to make is the scope of the project. Obviously, we don't want to make it bigger than it needs to be, but you also don't want to be so narrow that we don't do like work at the same time. So if we solely work on just the HVAC system and do the initial feasibility study, you're simply going to be patching and fixing what you currently have for equipment. The suggestion that we've been given by those working on it or people working in the building is that the issues are much farther than maybe a malfunctioning thermostat or a particular air handler that's not functioning correctly. It may be more pervasive. So if you're going to do a comprehensive overhaul of that system, the $100,000 grant that was secured, 10 of which was approximately for the feasibility study, the remaining money would be the repair work, likely would not fix that issue. You all recall back in 2019 we did the system here. This was $100,000 just to take care of this one building. Obviously the square footage of the school is much greater. The secondary issue is that you have rooftop units. They all sit on pedestals on top of the rubber roof. So now you have a potential leak issue. We know we have a leak issue, but where those protrusions are, it's unclear. That whole roof membrane needs to be replaced. That's your opportunity to do your energy efficiency work to make that building as energy efficient as possible. So when you take that scope of the roof membrane, the weather insulation, and then the rooftop units that may have to be closed or replaced, depending on what the most appropriate solution is, you're not talking about a project that's $100,000. You're talking a project that's probably over $1 million. You're talking a project that likely triggers the designer selection process, which is a whole scope of work in and of itself that we'd have to do. It would likely lead to an OPM being hired for the project. This is a much different scope and scale. If you're looking for a useful life of 20 plus years on the roof and the HVAC system, which is what I assume you all want as opposed to a Band-Aid, you're probably talking a very large, multi-year complex project. And that's the conversation that we had with the capital subcommittee for the school, with representation from capital and FinCom. We had the superintendent and Caitlin at that meeting as well. So the work that I'm looking to right now, we've been waiting for longer than we should have for Eversource to get back to us on the energy efficiency audits. They are the utility that can designate under the Mass General Law that allows for energy efficiency. So we are waiting on a response from Eversource. But at the same time, we have the Inflation Reduction Act through the federal government, and there's an opportunity to use some new funding streams that have come through that act to fund projects like this. And the towns of Deerfield, Greenfield, and Sunderland, maybe, I think was the other town, are looking at doing a joint application with us for projects in each of those communities. And FERCog is offering to be sort of the lead administrator on that, because the federal requirements are much greater, but the potential benefit for doing this work could be much better in terms of the financing rates, the potential credits that can come back to the vendors. It can make this project quite feasible. So all of those are a lot of moving pieces that we're exploring. So it's hard to give a true budget number. We don't have a proper feasibility study to give you all the different tasks, how they should be staged and ordered. But time does feel as if it's running out. I understand the immediacy. At the same point, we don't have the details that we need to give you those clear answers.
Yep.
So that was a long-winded answer.
Yep. No, thank you. It really has become, it started out as one project, and then it became very clear that it was not just this one project anymore. And it really snowballed into a much bigger issue. And so that's why I say now having FERCog potentially coming on board and the Eversource, it's going to help us kind of see the light and which direction to take, and kind of give us some guidance, because it's far beyond us, our ability to manage this project.
What we need now is buckets,
For the moment.
which is sad.
I know a place you can get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, no. A few years ago, I remember we were applying for the SBA loan program. Was that for the roof?
It was, and we were denied.
That one time.
Correct.
Loosely, I thought that we were going to continue trying until we had a roof or we had funding.
I know that some of the sister schools in Union 28 have
Yep.
continued to try, and I believe they've also had mixed success.
Yep.
The age of your roof is like a patchwork.
Yeah, and that
Half-
seems to be a moving target too, that
Right.
the required age of the roof needed to be some, and then it needed to be this, and then it needed to be that, and so it was not
Right.
a very clear and easy process to
Right.
go through.
And I'm sure if we don't know what the number we need is, it's not helpful either.
Right.
But I just, there's a lot of avenues that we need to probably explore to get this to happen.
For sure.
Successful.
And they've now changed that requirement on the age of the roof yet again. So it sounds like maybe we might be, not to use too many but in the window of the roof age, so that we might qualify.
Skylights? No.
Right?
Until we apply, and we change it again.
And they change it again? Oh my God.
Yeah.
And it may be a funding source that you're going to need to access.
Sure.
As we patchwork what this looks like, if the Inflation Reduction Action does a piece, and we have a local appropriation, it may be that the state piece is what makes all of it work together. So we may need to avail ourselves of all of those options.
Yeah.
But until we get that full concept from somebody who can do this multi-pronged type of project, I think we don't know what to apply for.
So then the only question is, it's hard to put a placeholder for FY '25 if this is a project that we think will start in FY '25.
I
We
think
understand that we can do Mackenzie, you had mentioned, the ask was, could you look at FY '24 and see if there's some portion of money that you could apply towards, if not all of,
The feasibility.
the feasibility?
Yeah.
Because I know we already have 10,000 towards that we could use from the HVAC grant. So then we're already 10,000 towards that feasibility. So whatever that is it a $25,000? Is it a 50,000? I have no idea.
I don't know either.
It could be 20, and we're only looking for 10 more. I have no clue, but
Yep.
that's the only quasi-known that we should be able to get relatively soon.
Right.
And then we're months out of, if not 6 months out of a feasibility study to ensure that we know what the future number would be.
Right.
So
Yep.
I don't even know if we could start it in FY '25.
I-
So then the
I
other
think
one is,
even if you have the firm numbers as to what the scope of the project is, what you want to start presenting for funding, I don't know that you'll be able to do all of that secure a contractor, schedule construction, and then you have to work around the in-session time
Yeah, the
period for the
students.
school.
Exactly.
You're aiming for a summer construction project. I don't know
So
how
it's
else you could do that.
FY26.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
And
see
I
I would
how
say
it's
at a minimum.
any sooner than 26.
Yeah. And
That's
so,
probably
so the
optimistic.
question is for FY25, do we put a placeholder to mitigate some of the issues, not to throw good money after bad? I mean, you don't want to, if you know you're doing $1 million overhaul, we don't want to go spend $300,000 of, towards fixing something that we're then going to rip out and replace.
Right.
But is there some sort of pot of, capital that we should put aside for that? And I don't know what that is. Is it going up there with more vinyl patches and finding where that leak is coming and doing that just to mitigate the next 18 months?
Can that be part of the scope of feasibility to give some
Absolutely.
recommendations
That-
on the
yeah.
interim
We did
too?
talk about that. We
Because
talked
that
about-
to me,
Has
once
to
we
be
have
both.
that, I mean, we don't have any number, so I would think we'd almost just want to come back. We'll have an STM at some point or whatever time frame that is when we have that data to say, okay, here's a number to
Yeah.
weigh against a cost, right? A
The
total
trend,
total plan
Yeah.
cost
Right.
and what to do.
When we talked about having them look not only at the roof, but at the structure underneath the roof, all of it, so that we made sure we're not putting a brand new roof over a rotten structure,
Right.
it is our hope that all of that would be looked at, and then we could, put it in tiers maybe of immediate need, can put off, wait, so that's our hope is that would come out of that.
It would be nice if we could find out for the summer of FY25 if there was sort of a patchwork that would get us to the next school year,
Right.
so that we're not pouring water into the library and classrooms and,
One other request that previous principals have made of us is to consider a solar panel array.
Yep.
I was
That
gonna
could
say, is that part
potentially
of-
help generate. Whether that's right for the roof or not is something that needs to be
But they
studied
can-
by a structural engineer.
Yep.
Or whether or not a ground mount would make more sense. The school is next to the treatment plant, one of our highest
Mini splits.
energy drawing buildings.
Yep.
So it makes sense
It's
to
all in
explore
there.
that if we're looking at holistically the building envelope and we're looking at the consumption of energy. We can look at, is generation even an option that also maybe isn't, task one, but maybe it's part of the overall project that we're trying to scope. Maybe it's a future task. If we can deal with all the other priorities, maybe that becomes the last task that we can explore.
Okay.
Put new rooftops and a new roof on a structure that can't hold solar that you hope to put in later.
Exactly.
It's all part of it, right?
Exactly.
Build ground up.
What is the substructure of that roof? Is it corrugated metal with,
With rubber overlay? I don't know.
Certain
I don't know.
sections appeared to be that, but that was only popping up a couple tiles and seeing what I could see from that vantage point, but I don't know fully.
Flat roof
Right, and you're
construction,
talking two
probably,
different-
but
Two different buildings. 'Cause you have the
Generations.
addition, two different generations. The addition was
Mm-hmm.
somewhere around 2000, give or take, right?
Yeah.
2001.
Yep.
Somewhere
Yep.
around there. And then the other building was previous to that, so
Right.
you're absolutely going to have two different substructures under there.
Yep,
and
that's,
having,
yep, very
having never
possible.
been up there, is there any rises in the roof, any bubbling, or are we?
I don't know.
No idea.
I'm
I've
just
never been up
asking
there
because
either.
that will at least tell me a little bit about what the substructure is, and what you might be looking at underneath, like you said.
we have leak, I can tell you, we had the HVAC question anyway. We had, now it sounds like leaks around the rooftop, protrusions, and then we know the skylights were a problem.
Yep.
And so I think it's a lot of different.
Yep.
I have,
issues
I
that
have
we
no
put
doubt it's a
together.
lot. I'm just trying to.
It's a
frame it
multiple
around
lot.
what
A
I-
lot.
What I know about roofs and.
Not good.
And that's why it wasn't an easy answer or an easy number to give you. It's, it's not that we don't know that there's a problem. We clearly know that there's a problem. It's just, it's a lot to figure out, and I hate to keep using that moving parts phrase, but that's what it is. And so we need to kind of get everything in a little bit clearer picture before we can even have an idea of how to move forward.
Deb, can I just ask a question out of curiosity?
Sure.
Not to point fingers at anyone or point blame at anyone, being new to the capital planning part and kind of how that communication works.
Yep.
You're saying that no capital planning projects were submitted?
Correct.
Who are they typically submitted by?
In the past, they've always come from your principals.
Okay.
Moving for FY '25, we are going to change that process a bit. We do feel like there is some disconnect between boards that have oversight and the people that they oversee submitting requests. So we don't ever want to have a situation, I'll just use you guys as an example, where your principal submits a request and then you guys go, who said you're building an addition? And we've approved something. So what we are going to do for FY '25 is those requests will have to be signed off on by you guys, or the Board of Selectmen, or whoever your appointing authority is. This is actually one of my concerns. This roof has been kicking around for years. Jim Trill brought us the skylight problem. This is something from a capital standpoint, capital is completely unprepared for. We haven't even been given a, hey, put this on your radar, we need to work on this, any of that. This now for the next probably 2, if not 3 fiscal years, affects every other town department. Because it is going to affect what funding will be available. It will affect what funding sources are out there, where we use things. There's been talk of dipping into the town's general stabilization account for different projects, but now we might have to do, it's where does all that funding come from and how do all those things work together? I am shocked that there is no capital requests from the school. I have a stack of things that we've turned down in the past. There was playground equipment, there was all kinds of stuff. So to come through a capital year and have a department say, we need absolutely nothing, but knowing there's an HVAC request out there, knowing there's a roof out there, knowing that just from walking around the school, you can see some of the stained tiles and stuff like that from where the leaks have occurred, knowing that the skylights are a problem. To get nothing is a little concerning. And to have something like this scale of a project, capital doesn't chase the departments and say, hey, we know you've talked about this before, where's the request? We trust our department heads to know what their needs are and to be submitting those requests. So for us, this is really kind of coming out of the blue, and we plan for 3 to 5 years. So now this kind of shifts everything that we've been working on. So yes, it's an important thing that has to get taken care of, but there definitely could have been better planning on how this happened. And I don't know if that's just because of the turnover at the school with the changing of principals and such. But I would definitely hope moving forward there is a much better working relationship.
So we just turned back over the money for the blinds.
Yep.
Or shades, whatever you want to call them, to kind of start over, knowing
Yep.
that 30,000 wasn't going to make it. We didn't want to try to piece things together. We want this fresh start. So there should have been a request for that put in already, or is that kind of grandfathered in, knowing that that's coming up, but you need totals from us? Like that's
For
just
which? For the blinds?
Yeah. So let's just use that as an example.
Sure.
How do we make sure that happens as soon as we can get it done? Kind of like, what would that look like?
Yep. So what you would do is during the budget process, and I believe it's in October, Brian sends out all the paperwork. Whomever, I know you guys now have a capital planning subcommittee, so whatever your process is, you would go through that process. If it was determined that the blinds are going to be one of the things, you have a capital request form, you fill it out, you send it back with your narrative, and then Brian disperses it. We then go through, we look at everything, we look at all the towns, every request that we've received, and then we let you know that yes, we are going to recommend this project, or no, we're not. And then it moves forward from there.
Or we have more questions, need
Yeah,
more
or we get-
information, whatever
Okay.
that may look like.
Which
And I'm
truthfully is
taking
us-
notes. I'm not texting.
Totally
Sorry.
fine, totally
I didn't have a
fine.
pen, so I was like, oh, I realized this looks really rude, but I promise it's not.
Totally fine.
So I'm not to put more on Brian, but it sounds like you may not have gotten that budget message, budget narrative. Did the whole committee get that? What we can do anyway, it doesn't matter. What we can do is resend you the November or October notice that went out, which included the deadlines, the capital forms, the message, the request, what was expected, all of those things. So you have it as reference and no offense, don't have to take it all down and
won't
try to
take any
memorize it
notes.
right this second. We can send it as a reference at least.
Okay, yeah, and
Continue
I'm
to
like
answer, but-
new on the subcommittee, so I'm trying to put all those pieces together. And so specifically with this blind kind of situation, that was that added for this year? Like, are we, because we gave the money back, are we starting fresh? Like, does this
Yes.
form need to be filled out?
Yes.
Like, this has to start all over? Okay.
Yes, anything, what we've tried to do on the committee in the past is if you had previously submitted something, we were working with a 25-year plan, and we have learned over the past few years that is just, for big ticket items, like we always use Chief's fire truck as the example, excuse me, that's something we can kind of plan for. We can say, okay, we bought one in this year, and we know we're going to need one in 25 years. Stuff like blinds and stuff like that, we're finding it's just too difficult to track that. So we're actually going to scale back to either like a 3 or a 5-year plan. Previously, we literally just kicked it. If you gave us the blinds and we didn't approve it, it just sat until we received it again from you. That is typically what we expect because we don't know if your needs have changed. So for FY24, you might have said, oh yeah, the window blinds, we want to get those done. And let's say we didn't approve it. FY25 rolls around and we either expect to see that request again, or we expect, you know what, we've gone and we've looked at things and we noticed that the library's got some really bad tiles, so we want to do that instead. So that's the request.
Okay.
And I'm saying request, but we often get 4, 5, 6 requests per department. You'll notice on the form, we do ask you to rank them. And so we do look at that, and we get some that are solely just what they call placeholders. And that just kind of tells us, hey, I'm going to ask for this, but maybe I need to do some more research, or this is going to be 2, 3 fiscal years down the road, but it's kind of a big ticket thing. So we just want to give you that heads up that this is going to be coming.
Okay. And so I'm going to just talk about blinds, I guess, but, so that has passed.
Yep.
And so coming up, our job should be that we are meeting with the administration, maybe walking through the building, doing whatever, making a list, and waiting until that October point to then submit these requests.
Yes.
Okay.
Unless, if it is something that you truly feel is absolutely urgent, it's a safety concern, it's something like that, you can submit the request at any time, and we're happy to review it.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that we're going to recommend it at that time, and any request like that is submitted out, what we call an out-of-cycle request, if we recommend it and the board approves it, we usually try to line those up when a special town meeting's being held.
Okay.
So that way it goes, there's a group of things, we're not just calling special town meetings whenever, kind of a thing. But yes, and we do ask that at least one quote be supplied.
Okay.
So that way we have a ballpark of what you're working on. We're really trying to get away, when an actual request is coming in, getting away from, this is an estimated dollar amount. Because right now, the way things are, blind store 1, 2, 3 could say, oh yeah, 50 thou. And then by the time it goes through our process, they go, price increase, 100,000. And then we have to start that process all over again.
Okay.
So we do ask for one quote.
Okay. That's helpful.
Just to jump in on the blinds, as an offhand comment, at some point in the last couple of meetings, Caitlin said that there already were some bids in hand.
Okay.
And
Reach out to her.
so check on what that was, because I think she was surprised that I guess it hadn't moved forward, and it had stopped, or the money had been taken back, but they were still moving forward with getting bids. I guess. I'm not
okay.
sure.
Okay,
It's not clear what was going on there.
okay. And
Because
just,
it is a safety concern.
Sure.
The blinds are not just to keep the sun out.
Correct.
It's a safety concern these days.
Yep, absolutely. And just for clarity, when the money is returned, it doesn't get earmarked for anything. So you don't have $30,000 sitting in an account somewhere. It was allocated back to the capital planning stabilization account, which is why we have to we would require a new form and new information, because then we look at it as the whole, as to what everything is.
Okay. Yeah, so whoever has that information, if they want to send it to me. I know I'm looking at Brian and Jake, but.
I'm doing it right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Super helpful, because then I'll just
I'm gonna
move forward
defer
and
that.
get this going and try to.
Delegate that.
Connect the dots, because as to seem the common thing is just communication. So I think, trying to build on those relationships and those connections and move, connect the dots and who needs to be involved and where those kind of next steps go.
Sure.
That would be super helpful. So
If you
I
want to
appreciate
see the tail end of the process, Capital right now is working on putting a meeting together with the department heads for March 7th.
that. Okay.
We're planning on 7 PM at the library, and that's where we're going to hopefully, let them know what has been recommended for this year and what hasn't, and give them a chance to ask any questions and that kind of thing. So if that's something, if you wanted to come, you're more than welcome to come to, and you would at least get to see what the end of the process looks like, which I know is a little backwards, but
Right.
it might give you some insight.
Oh, that's helpful. You said at the library, right?
Yeah.
March 7th
Yeah.
at 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're not, I think it's not just to this group here. Most of you probably weren't in those positions at the time, but we referenced skylights and HVAC and all these things over the years. And as long as capital planning's been in existence, correct me if I'm wrong, for those who've been here as long as that, I don't think we've had any one of those sort of things come across the table, even with a question mark on the amounts, and understand if we had gotten one 5 years ago, it'd be evolving and we'd still be working on a number, and we get that, but I think it's just that it's not even on the 25-year plan. That's probably too optimistic, but
Yeah.
so we can,
Okay.
I will look to the capital planning members. Is there anything else right now, knowing where we are now or where we're trying to go now on this big situation, that you want more information on before we have something professional back, I guess?
I think that, for me, the number one answer would be is if the school has the funding for the feasibility study, what that looks like, or how much can you guys contribute, and a number, and I know that's probably more of a Brian thing, a kind of firmed up number of what the feasibility study may cost.
Fine, we'll try to get that for you.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay. Good on capital requests for now,
Yeah.
tonight? I know we asked the question, but. Goodish. Goodish, good is relative. Moving on to secondary, I know we're up against time, so, but were we ready for that, or other questions before? Secondary.
I mean, the secondary, it is what it is. We don't have control over the
Was waiting for
secondary,
that.
so I'm not sure that I'm gonna be able to answer too many of your questions, but, fire away. If there's anything in particular that you wonder about.
I'll just,
Yep, by the
no,
way.
I was looking at it, I know at one of the last meetings, Caitlin, I think you're the rep, no, you're not the rep, but you were.
No, I read the report.
You read the report, that's what it was. And then they were talking about a 3% increase, and I'm sure that's based off of their numbers, not what we budget in ours, because our actuals are different every year. It's been one FY '21, it was only 5,500, but it's typically been between $100,000 and $150,000 over budgeted for 22, 23. Don't know what 24 is going to look like. We're in the middle of it right now. But I see they reduced it. It'll be a reduction of about 86,000.
368.
Did I flip those?
You're
Yep.
one
Yeah.
about one line up, I think.
Yep.
That's just the difference in other programs with other schools
you.
is 85, but the net
68.
is
So
68.
thank you, 68,000 decrease from last year. My guess is there'll still be a surplus from FY '24 because the numbers are always fluid of what actual enrollment is, because we don't get those numbers until October.
October, right?
After we've already set the budget 6 months prior. So, you
Yep.
know, I appreciate the decrease in saying, here's the numbers we have to work with now. Our enrollment looks like it's trending down as far as there. We'll see. Yeah. I don't think the reduction will put us at risk of not having enough, where they'll be coming back at the end of the year saying, we estimated too low. I'm sure it'll cover it.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at history, that's not been the case.
Yeah.
With the
It-
exception of a couple of dollars, but,
Yeah. We haven't spent over, the highest was FY '23 at 1.379, so
Yep.
we'll,
Yeah, and we've been doing the 1477 for a while.
for 3
and
Yep.
years,
Yeah.
yeah.
It looks like this year primarily the reduction in transportation is the reduction in the request,
Yeah.
and that historically still gives us a $150,000 buffer in there. So, if the trend holds.
Yep.
Questions? I know historically we've tried to just budget it flat or something similar, and then if we have to come back and adjust for enrollment, we will in the fall.
Can I just ask, the number of students or enrollment that we have for
I-
this? Is it, I know some stay here for 6, others go over, but, so 6 through 12, do we have a number?
I don't have that number for you, but I can get it for you. Yep. Are you wanting to know how many sixth graders or how many total?
How many total, 6
Okay.
through 12?
Could we get that for, like, the last actual from 21 to now, just to get a sense against the budget that we've been spending? Or the actuals? If we can get 21, 22, 23 actuals,
So,
because, well, we have 24 actuals too.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
so the last 4 years,
Just so
please.
you know, when sixth graders decide to go, that's school choice. It doesn't go against our
Oh.
agreement is only 7 through 12.
Right.
So if our sixth
Oh.
graders
So
decide
it's-
to leave.
So it's a school choice
that
elementary
becomes a
cost, not
$5,000
or a
school
choice
choice.
sheet?
To
Yeah.
choice into Gil Montague, that our agreement is only 7 through 12.
That's correct.
And where does that end up? Cherry sheet?
Cherry sheet.
Cherry sheet.
It's not even in the budget. It's not in the elementary school
Okay,
budget
so-
either. It's in the
Nope,
cherry
it's
sheet.
a
7
five.
through 12?
7 through 12,
Yeah.
yep.
Okay.
We did get numbers, but I don't remember them.
Yeah, I don't have them right here.
Yeah,
for
no,
you.
just for,
Thank you,
we can get 'em
Scott,
up.
for that clarification.
I didn't know.
At 9 because of tech,
Doesn't that change what?
at grade 9, because of tech, because it,
But 7 through 12 actually attending
At Gil
each year
Montague.
at Gil
right,
Montague,
but you're
the
gonna have
number at
more
Tech is
6
separate.
and 7, and
Sure.
7 and 8, that you will have going 9 through 12.
Maybe, yeah.
Right, but he asked for total enrollment each, and I asked for the last 4 years.
Okay.
Where I'm trying to go, Peter, in my brain is pre-K through 12.
What's our
How many
numbers?
students
Okay.
are we looking at? And I know every student has a different value, whether it's an IEP or an out-of-district and all that. I am, bear with the new guy.
Cost,
I'm just
cost.
trying
He
to
means
get
cost.
costs per
Not value.
average, knowing there are variables, but
In other words, how many Erving kids do we have total?
Yes. How many
And-
Erving students
and what we are
in some
spending,
level of education?
elementary, tech, and secondary, and I'm trying to frame it, because there are people who do ask us questions, they catch us at Stop and Shop, or they catch us, and I'm a little embarrassed when I have to say, I don't know that yet, but I will find out and I will get back to you.
Yep. And I don't know that right now, but I will get back to
Excellent. Together we'll get through it.
you. I know, right? It's hard following up the tech. Can I just tell you that? I don't have a PowerPoint.
The bar
I'm
was
also
set
not a
high. Mr. Barton
superintendent,
sets
so-
the bar very high, so.
Yeah.
I get paid a lot less, so let's just put that out there.
Yes, you do.
Not his first rodeo either.
And they have a
No.
lot more towns, let alone constituents, who are scrutinizing that, so kudos to them for putting that together, but that's a lot behind that, I
Yep.
imagine. Okay, good on secondary,
Yep.
sounds like. Thank you all for
All right.
joining and
Yeah.
for your
Thank you.
information.
Appreciate
Do
that.
we have to?
Should we
adjourn?
anticipate?
I was like, can give them
we-
a second to do business?
Yes,
Yes.
We just have to adjourn from our school committee meeting.
yes.
So,
They're
Not
running
a
motion.
simultaneously.
Do you
I'll
have
second
business? Oh, okay.
all in favor?
Just for
Aye.
clarity.
Aye.
9:06.
Thank you.
Because our joint,
9:06.
they were running.
Thank you.
Right, I did catch that vaguely in the background, yeah, yeah. Did, I was just gonna ask, do you have an estimate on when, or do you wanna let us know, like, how long till we hear back on some of that stuff? You think a couple weeks or a week, or?
I mean, we have people out sick, so I would give it at least this week and then school vacation, so
Couple weeks,
I would say, yeah.
okay. Just thinking about our budget process and timing and stuff.
Yeah. I would say at earliest would be the last week in February.
So, those positions that are out sick and couldn't join us tonight, though, they work through the school vacation. That's not vacation.
They may
week.
or may not. It depends on their schedule. I mean, they're able to take vacation too, so I don't know whether they will be in the office or not.
Fair enough.
So that's why I would assume not, and then be happy if they were. So that's why I say the last week in February, I'm sorry, would be the earliest I think we could realistically
Okay,
Okay.
get them. But I will email them tonight and see how it goes.
see what happens.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did I missed what you
I
were,
was just
is
gonna say,
it?
do you have any additional business for us?
I don't.
No.
Do you guys have anything for tonight? Anything else?
No.
That sounds like a motion to adjourn from.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion
That
to
sounded like one
adjourn.
from you. Was there a second?
Works for me.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.